You wanna play games? Okay. I'll play with you. Come on. Okay. Do you wanna play rough? Okay. No. Say hello to my little friend!
Hello and welcome back to the show. And if you've listened previously, you know last week we talked about Pacino and we covered a scene from Scarface and Carlito's Way. And this week, it's my pleasure to bring back my friend and fellow podcaster Scott to talk another pivotal scene from Scarface. Scott, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back. A twofer, my second time.
Yeah, you were my first guest on the show, and I love podcasting with you so much. When we had the opportunity to talk Scarface, I said, this is perfect. We can dovetail last week's discussion right into more Pacino, get a lot of the Pacino content out of the way, and people that are Pacino fans will get their Pacino fix, and then we'll move on. So, Scarface, 1983, De Palma's 14th film. It came out in between. He had previously done Blowout, so he was coming off of a critically acclaimed movie. And then after this, he made Body Double. So you've got a really good 3-film run.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what else or how to start with Scarface. I think that there's probably a handful of films that you can mention that people would know Brian De Palma from.
Yes.
And Scarface is definitely one of those.
Mm-hmm.
What does Scarface sort of mean to you in terms of the overall film landscape?
So I'm going to say something that may or may not be politically correct for De Palma fans. I believe this is his magnum opus. Now, I will caveat that by saying, as a Tarantino fan, I think Pulp Fiction's his best film. Is it everyone's favorite film? Is it his best directed film? That's always up for debate. But as far as the landmark, the film that, if you took away all films, what's one film that if you had to pick one film from each director that just signifies a time, a place, it's a cultural phenomenon, Scarface is that film for Brian De Palma. Now, I know there'll be other people on here who will, they'll say Blowout's his best film. And look, maybe directorial wise or this and that, but few films are able to have one of my guests called it the "Here's Johnny" moment, where you say a line, and whether you've seen that film or not, it's from the film, right? Like you don't have to see it. So we're gonna need a bigger boat. Bring out the Gimp. Here's Johnny. Say hello to my little friend. It's such a phenomenon of a film that it literally is like ground zero for 90s rap for a lot of people. Like Scarface is the film that kind of makes gangster rap want to be gangster rap. They want to be Scarface. They don't want to be a Godfather. Yeah. They don't care about the Godfather. That's not realistic to a lot of people. Where like Goodfellas later on, 7 years later, would kind of be a similar touch point for Scorsese. He was a blue collar guy. Pacino is fucking
from the streets,
chewing up the street. He's a piranha in a kid's pool. You know what I mean? Like He is chewing up the goddamn scenery in this. But I love The Untouchables. That was like my real first, because like Scarface came out in 83.
Yeah.
It came out 2 days before my 8th birthday.
Yeah. So
there's no way I'm seeing Scarface till in the 90s. So I'm in my teenagers before I see Scarface. So I'm not going to pretend I'm like, I was on that train in 1983. No, I think my first real introduction to Brian De Palma would have been 1987's Untouchables. I mean, that's one of those films. It's like, love that film. It's like a warm bath. You know what I mean? Like, I just love it. That being said, I just think Scarface is that film that will forever be Brian De Palma's film. And again, like I said, I'm sure many of your guests will debate which one his best is. You may even not even think it's the best either, and that's perfectly fine. But if you were to, if you put the list up and John Q. Public had to look at it, I would go with 95% are going to pick Scarface. That's the one they're going to pick. And it's bizarre because if you do look at his filmography, it is one of those, like, I don't want to say sore thumbs, but it's one of those ones that just kind of like pops up and just kind of, you go, wait a minute, he directed Scarface? You know what I mean? I think a lot of people forget that he directed Scarface who aren't De Palma fans.
Yeah, and that's the funniest thing about Brian De Palma, and the thing I thought was most interesting about doing this show, because on Facebook the other night, I posted about watching Wise Guys, which is a mid 80s comedy he did with Joe Piscopo and Danny DeVito. And I think at least 2 or 3 people that commented on that post said, I had no idea that was De Palma. And that's the thing that I think really sort of makes me such a fan of him as a filmmaker, but also led me to believe that there could be a really good podcast devoted to him, because there are so many anomalies in his filmography where, it's like, even Scarface to his next movie, Body Double. I mean, and I'm on a Body Double kick right now. I mean, not Body Double's on Netflix. I think Netflix did this 40th at, 1984, 40 years. So they've put up a lot of films from 1984, Beverly Hills Cop, Body Double, all kinds of movies. If you go to Netflix, you'll see it. So for the longest time, Body Double wasn't on streaming. When I first got the Criterion channel a couple, maybe a year ago, it was on, and then it disappeared. So then the other day when I saw it was back on streaming, I was like, oh, fuck yeah. So I watched it, and then I was like, oh man, I don't have the Blu-ray yet, and I've been waiting for the 4K. And then I was finally like, 4K is probably not coming. So I ordered the Indicator region-free release of Body Double, and like right now, if you're holding a gun to my head, I'm gonna say the movie I want to watch is going to be Body Double. But and that's the cool thing about directors in general, Scott, is like a good director like De Palma, or like you said, Tarantino. There's really no wrong answer. I mean, if you really if you really get down to the mat and start debating, I'm sure you can come up with a general consensus that can't be really argued. But I think most directors that are worth their salt are going to have multiple movies that people are going to say, oh yeah, that's their best. Or I think you kind of expressed it really well by saying it's sort of like his hallmark film.
Yeah, it's that one that everyone, like grandma might know, you know what I mean? Like the little kids might know, like everyone will know. Like you said, there are going to be niche films. Scorsese's got stuff like that too, but they'll, like they're gonna go, oh, it's Taxi Driver or like Goodfellas. Like no one's gonna say The Silence or something like that. But some people may love those films, you know what I mean? And he's got great ones, but there are those ones that you just go, like everyone knows them. Like they're just those movies that even images of Scarface. And I was reading up, doing a little more research, but what are we coming out, like 30 or 40 years, 41 years since, and you can still buy the poster and pictures from it in shops now. Like, I mean, this is now gone on for almost as long as Star Wars. It's like Star Wars. It's got that kind of like iconography where like you just see him standing there with the gun, or you see, different shots, oh yeah, it's him. I'm a huge Grand Theft Auto fan, and one of the best Grand Theft Auto games, when it really kicked it into high gear was Vice City. Came out in early 2000s.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of that game is based on a lot of what happens. A lot of the missions, some of the storylines being told are based on, of course, this film. And obviously, as I said, 90s rap really embraced Scarface. I mean, it's a lot of big time rappers' favorite movie. Someone once said, I think Snoop Dogg said he watched this every week or every day or something, like every month or something like that, for a long time. Like he watched this all the time. And it kind of like is like gives them that persona, right? Like they watch it to look at Tony Montana, see how he acts, and then kind of get that vibrato and that fucking machismo and like the big fucking balls, big dick energy originally. Like Tony Montana has big dick energy, you know what I mean? Like early on, and it really became a persona. And I think people gravitated to that, which is odd because he's also in one of the other greatest crime dramas ever. He's also from The Godfather. And his two characters couldn't be more polar opposites if they tried.
Yeah, and in the previous episode, I talked with Brian about Pacino in general as an actor, so I don't want to get too redundant there, but I mean, what Pacino brings to his collaborations with De Palma really helps make the films. So what we're going to do, well, actually, one other thing before we jump to the scene, and this scene kind of supports it, though, is this, I think, was a watershed moment for De Palma too, because Blowout has, some action, quote unquote, action sequences where, car stuff going on, and so it's more suspense. But here I'd say it's like probably legitimately his first true action sequence. And we're going to talk about the iconic and I'd say logical conclusion of Scarface. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think there's any other end for Tony Montana than the one that we get in this movie.
You know, the great things about the American crime stories is we see the rise and fall and what happens when you get, too close to the sun. It's like the Icarus moment, right? You get too close to the sun, wings melt off, and you plummet hard. And the neat thing about the ending, and I'd forgotten how it kind of sets itself up, because the ending, how it's going to, we know that Sosa's men are coming, and he's basically taking on an army of drug cartel soldiers by himself, and and a mountain of cocaine and a fucking M16 with a 203 grenade launcher on it. But the interesting part is the Shakespearean kind of drama that happens before that I think a lot of people forget.
Yeah.
Is he's sent to kill this reporter who's going to detail a report on these Bolivian drug runners, and he's sent to kill him, and they're going to blow up the car the guy's in.
Great sequence, by the way.
But there's two little girls get in, and it's the guy's wife, and that was not a part of the plan. And so as they're about to do it, he ends up killing a guy who would later go on to probably even more fame in Breaking Bad, which is interesting because one of the things that people have drawn a conclusion to is, Tony shoots him because he's the guy, the button man, he's going to blow up the car.
Yeah.
And in Breaking Bad, he's the one who hits the button and blows up Gus. So it's kind of like this interesting kind of turn for him. Like his whole cinematic
I'm sure that
is
was
complete.
by design.
100%. So Tony does like a very human thing. He's like, I'm a piece of shit, but I'm not that kind of piece of shit.
Yeah, I wasn't hired to kill kids.
He's like a code.
Yeah,
he's like a code. Like, I'll kill people who are in the game. Like, it's like, and again, this is not like a shot at any police or anything, but like when you're in law enforcement and you're the criminals, you carry weapons for a reason. Like, that there's a good chance that life one day could end due to your line of work. And a lot of times they try to keep those people in both worlds, try not to have any collateral damage, unlike war where they just, people just, it's part of the game. So it's awesome to see Tony have like a moment of like, oh my God, a redeeming moment, which is quickly followed up by like a very weird, almost Freudian moment where he's gone home. He's got to find his sister. He can't find Manny.
Yeah.
Shit's hit the fan. He knows that Sosa's going to be coming for him. And, shows up at the house and shoots Manny, kills Manny, and then finds out that he's just married his sister. And then, that by the time they get to the mansion, they're starting to come over the wall. And so it kind of goes bizarre. And she walks in.
Yeah.
And she's accusing Tony wanting to fuck her.
Yeah.
And, it's such, so much happens
she
in that
just saw
moment.
her new husband get murdered.
Yes. Post-coitus by that as well.
Yeah.
So they're both in like the glow.
And that is Mary Elizabeth Mastrantoni.
Yeah, she's great in that.
So yeah, before we get to that encounter, I think that I really wanted to start this scene. It starts with Tony at his desk. He has just gotten back to the mansion. He's at his desk with the pound of cocaine. And this is probably the most De Palma moment of this scene is we start on the video screens behind him.
Yeah.
And we see the invasion. We see the guys coming over the walls, and it does this like slow tracking shot around the desk and around to Tony. And then we see his two henchmen come in. It's a total De Palma moment. But the thing I really like about that, Scott, is it sets up the monitors and how important those are going to be, because those are going to give Tony information later in the scene.
And it's going to cause us, the viewer, to decide, do we watch Tony or do we watch the monitors? Just like we talked about in Snake Eyes, right? Like, what are you going to watch? Yeah, exactly. What are you going to miss?
It's interesting because his sister pulls a gun on him. I think she's at the point of no return. I don't think she was going to go home back to mom and go back to her regular job. I think she was probably going to be institutionalized, regardless, or depending on how this scene, if she did walk out of this scene alive. Because, she seems like her brain has just snapped. She actually successfully shoots Tony in the thigh. And I'm really curious how Tony would have de-escalated this had that guy not come in and shot her.
First, you've got the combination of cocaine. I mean, he is already high. This is also a moment where we see Tony not as confident anymore.
Yeah.
he did the right thing not blowing up the car, but now he knows he's going to have to reap the whirlwind from it.
Mm-hmm.
So he's trying to be like, we're going to go to war, but I think he knows I don't have enough to go to war with this guy. Then he just realized that he made a huge mistake by shooting Manny, who's his right-hand man, because jealousy or doesn't think he's good enough for his sister. He realizes the only person who actually who cared about him in the family was his sister.
Yeah.
So he's losing her. So all these things are happening at once, and he's sitting at that desk, and he doesn't, for like the first time in the film, doesn't really know what to do. And it's not until she's actually killed that he's actually able to do something.
Game face.
So if that guy coming, like if he had, and he hasn't even come to terms that she's dead because he tells her,
I'll be right back.
Yeah. He's all fucked up. I mean, it's not just the cocaine that's fucking him up. It's his whole world has just crumbled at his feet in less than 24 hours. He goes from, we're going to flip a switch, blow this up. And, the scene in before that, like this whole, the downfall starts at that dinner where basically Michelle Pfeiffer's character, Elvira, she basically leaves him. And then he goes to, then he goes to New York and that gets fucked up and he comes home. Like, it's just a fucking constant, it's just one landmine after the next.
Yeah.
And I think us seeing the betrayal, and it's the eyes. It's just the way he emotes through his eyes when he's crazy, when he's mad. Like when he looks at Manny 5 minutes before the scene starts and he's shot, like the look in his eyes, like you're like, holy fuck, like you can feel the anger and and then once he's realized he's fucked up with his sister, his eyes are he's kind of like glazed over, almost kind of like in a haze, in a fog,
Yeah.
Even his men are coming in, and they don't do the Spanish interpretation, which is great because they're outside. But you can tell they're talking because he comes out in the veranda, and you can tell they're talking about, like, I think he's fucking lost it. Like they're starting to question their loyalty to him now. Like they think, oh, he's fucking gone off the deep end. But unlucky for them, they chose a little too late because it's like 2 seconds later, Sosa's men are up over the wall and they're like knifing them and grouting them and quietly killing them.
Yeah, and that's what finally snaps Tony out of it is one of his henchmen is right outside the door begging to let him in.
Yeah, one of his buddies.
And he sees that guy get shot, and that's when he gets back into the game, if you will, and he looks at the monitor and again he sees what's outside his door. And that's when he gets the big guns. Like, I even think there's a moment where he considers getting one of the guns that's already on the table. And he's like, no, I need the big boy for this.
Mm-hmm. And they sets up one of the most iconic moments in cinema.
Yeah.
It just does, he's standing there and it's so, again, this is just, there are moments in cinema that there's just a tip of a cap.
Yeah.
And you just kind of go, it's like chef's kiss. Like, it's the perfect actor. It's the perfect moment. It's the perfect delivery. It's the perfect framing. It's the perfect everything in that moment. And he fires that 203 grenade round,
which nobody expected.
Say hello to my little friend. And he blows the doors open. And like
nobody on the other side of that door expected that. No. They were expecting something, but they weren't expecting to get blown up.
And you're just like. Like, I think it's the moment where like a lot of men then go, that's how I want to go out. You know what I mean? You've got like this romantic feeling of like you're a gladiator at this moment. Like, if I'm going to go out, I'm going out like this. I'm fucking taking a whole bunch of cocksuckers with me. You know what I mean? It's this weird mental state.
Yeah. And I think we've got the benefit of an accident to sort of, help this scene become what it became. I'm sure that using that big gun, there was a take where Pacino grabbed the barrel while it was still hot, burned his hand, and he was actually on the bench for 2 weeks. So De Palma had this mansion and all these henchmen and just started shooting a shootout without Scarface. And I'm not sure if you know this or not, but even one day of the shooting, Steven Spielberg came by, De Palma's buddy Steven Spielberg, and he even directed a couple shots. So basically, De Palma has said, we filmed as many ways as we could to shoot people.
Yeah, why not?
Which must have been great because then when he gets Pacino back to shoot the other end of things, he's got any option he needs. I'm sure in the editing room they were able to just be like, footage galore. And I think that really benefited the scene. I mean, it wasn't planned that Pacino was gonna hurt himself and be out of action
Yeah.
for 2 weeks. They were like, hey, now that just gives us ability to, sort of shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot. And it's just a ballet of bullets. I mean, people talk about John Woo shootouts and things like that. But you've got the 2 staircases leading up, and Tony's at the top.
At the top.
And you've got that globe that says the world is yours.
Yep. Which is paying homage to the original 1930s Scarface, which is about Al Capone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, there's a lot of visual stuff going on, going there. And the other thing I really like about the sequence is we've got the guy that's kind of come in through the window.
Yeah, the skull, I think his nickname is. Yeah.
And there's a shot that just frames Montana from behind in a doorway. It's just such a perfectly framed shot. And then we'll cut to the reverse and we'll see past Tony and see his Grim Reaper coming up.
Yeah.
But the thing I love about it, Scott, is at this point, Tony has taken half a dozen shots.
I think the total number, to include his sister, is he shot 10 times on screen. So 9 from them and 1 from her.
Yeah.
Before the final, shoots.
I mean, this is where it gets into big cinema mode, because he's responding like he's indestructible, and how those bullets, I mean, in the real world, he would have gotten shot 9 times and he would have hit the ground. But no.
Probably. Or maybe Rick James is right. Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
But either way, I just love that superhero moment that Tony has.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where he really seems indestructible until he gets shot close range by a shotgun right in the back. And we get that great reaction from Tony, and then the slow motion fall into the water. And then the dude walks down the stairs. And we get
such a great craning shot. It's like all this chaos and all of this like bravado is silenced, and you realize that sometimes you aren't as big as you think you are. And that's kind of like this really, it's always that like people always say, just because you think you're the greatest, there's always somebody coming up who's bigger and better than you kind of thing. It's that kind of like you're king of the mountain for so long, and then all of a sudden your day's over and you don't realize it, and then someone removes you out of the equation. And with all this explosion, this gunshot, and Pacino is just the perfect guy in this moment to be playing Tony. And he goes over, and as he goes into the water and we crane down, and even the music starts to get subdued, the men are almost like, all right, we're done next. All right, there's another ant that we have crushed who thought they were going to rise up, and now we're going to go back to Sousa. And it's kind of like, even the skull was kind of like, this is how it was always going to end. And it's funny because Frank does warn him early in the movie.
Yeah.
If you like early, he says, if you fuck up with Sousa, he's going to send an army after you.
Yeah.
And he wasn't fucking lying. You know what I mean? Like, it really happened. And it was a really, really poetic ending that you kill off this beloved character that we've grown to fall in love with, even though he's a terrible person. But we kind of see ourselves in him because it's a person who pulled themselves up from nothing and became something because they believed in themselves. Probably not the story you tell your children at night, like, you want to be like Scarface, right? You want to be Tony Montana. But the way De Palma is able to close that film out, and again, probably a lot of people don't analyze like we do, like they probably have a life. They're like, hey, it was a great movie. And they go off, they do something else. Where we sit there and take notes, like, wait a minute, here's what he's trying to say. But when you kind of watch that craning shot down, they go up and it's up above and you can see it. And even the guy who just killed him, it's like just another day at the office for him too. He's, in some movies it's a celebration, they're talking shit, he just shoots them, doesn't say a word, that's his job, and they go about, and then they're just kind of like, the house is on fire and things, and they're like, all right, time to go. It's, it's really almost like a workman's mentality. Like, all right, we did our job and now we're out. And all of this fuss for one guy who was easily dispatched. It was a great power move, because when you watch The Godfather and stuff like that doesn't happen, because they are the ultimate, right? Like, even no matter what happens, they always find a way to kind of get their revenge. There's always that great moment where we get Coppola showing us like 3 to 4 different things going on at one time. And like, we keep cutting between them. And, while, Michael's off at some event, other people are out killing the people who are his enemies, who have pissed him off throughout the entire movie. But in this one, it was kind of like almost this very more realistic feel of like, when you're not at that level, when you're not the Corleones, the Sosas, this is what happens to you when you try to get bigger than your station. And I mean, hey, don't get me wrong though. Tony Montana goes down like a champ, right? Like no one can say he went down like a bitch. They say that, it's better to go out on your feet than live on your knees. And he went out on his fucking feet. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And one thing you sort of mentioned, the music fading out, and I think we'd be doing the sequence a disservice if we didn't talk a little bit at least about how great the music in this movie is. And we've got the legendary Giorgio Moroder. Hopefully I said his name correctly, who's just got this really just inspired score. Perfect score for the film, perfect score for the end of the movie.
Yep.
But again, to get to that end shot, I love the way De Palma ends his movies. Because a lot of times, this movie, we get that beautiful crane shot and then it fades out. And then we'll get other times like the end of Snake Eyes where we just see the construction of the new convention hall going on.
Yep.
And also the end of Body Double. The whole credits are them shooting a scene with a body double.
Well, Untouchables does the same thing as this does.
Yeah.
We crane up as Elliot Ness walks away.
Yeah.
We crane up into Chicago. And so it's just kind of like this overview.
Yeah. In terms of De Palma sort of end shots, this is definitely one of my favorites. I almost would have really liked if they didn't fade to black as soon and we just saw the aftermath, just all the bodies, the water getting redder and redder from all the blood and stuff. But a remarkable sequence. I think it like you said, it brought De Palma to a different level. It wasn't a critical or commercial success at the time, but I still think it impacted his career in a positive way.
Well, it's a lot like, if we think about the early 80s, you've got The Thing, you've got Blade Runner, you've got Scarface. They were not big hits, but yet they're three of the greatest movies to ever come out. And they all came out around the same time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, again, just as audiences just don't, sometimes a movie's ahead of its time.
Yeah,
and some of these
the world
movies
has to catch
are
up.
ahead of their time.
Yeah,
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and then they become these cinematic darlings years down the road. And there are films that can't even keep up with some of these films. Like they're trying. We have better technology, and they still cannot, do what And again, they're three amazing directors who were starting in their prime of their careers at that time. You got Ridley Scott, we got John Carpenter, and then of course we're getting Brian De Palma. So these guys are just, they're fucking hitting home runs, and everyone else is trying to catch up. It's just, like everyone else is still playing checkers, and these guys are playing chess with us. And we're like, well, I think the movie that beat this on opening weekend was some half-rate movie from Clint Eastwood. It's like, but. Yeah, Clint Eastwood is, look, he's probably a marketable guy at the time, and people are going to go see this, but that movie no one gives a shit about. Like, I'll be honest with you, no one's doing a podcast on that movie, and here we are talking about Scarface 40 years later, and it's, one of those movies you're like, that's it reminds me of Clarence when he's talking to, when they're in True Romance, and he's talking about the movies, and he goes, that's a fucking movie. Like, those are fucking movies, right? Those are fucking movies. Not, whatever it was. I forget what Clint Eastwood put out.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, it's funny too, and I know we're running out of time here, but it's funny. This was produced by Martin Bregman, and you wonder, like, at what point Martin Bregman thought this was going to be a huge hit, because it's an R-rated movie. It's over 2.5 hours long.
Yep. It got 2 X ratings the first 2 times it went to the MPAA.
Sometimes you're like, thank God somebody thought enough to finance this film, because like The Thing as well, it's this dark sci-fi movie, coming out the same summer as E.T. It's wild. So thankful for the people that had the foresight to make a movie, and I'm sure Universal has made their money back 10 times over with how many times they've released this Scarface on home video and put out I think the DVD version I have is the platinum edition, the 4K is the gold edition. So, Scott, thank you for talking Scarface with me.
Thank you for having me on again.
I'm sure we'll talk again, another one of De Palma's films. And for those that don't remember from the first episode, just give people a quick rundown of what they can expect if they listen to one of your podcasts.
So if you listen to the Church of Tarantino, right now we're talking nothing but Pulp Fiction as it reaches 30. That's how I met Mr. Craig Cohen as he was doing his old Pulp Fiction one. I also do a Dropping a Bruce with my buddy Steve Smith, where we talk about the 40 films that Bruce Willis has dropped on the VOD market, and then our mainstay. Yeah, it's definitely. I'm doing the Lord's work for sure on this one. And then we also do our other Cheeky Bastards show called Men of Action, and that is putting two films against one another, two action films. And so, we've had a great time doing that as well. We're about to do a Stallone one. We're about to put Cobra. I don't know when this will be out, but in May, in June, or maybe July. July. Yeah. Cobra goes up against Rambo 4.
Oh.
So, wow. Two great films against one another. So, excellent. Two Stallone stalwarts. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And I'll include the link in the show notes where people can find all your podcasts. And Scott, thank you again.
Thank you, sir, for having me on.
I know we're going to talk again soon.
Absolutely.
Take care.